exposed to a different city, and weaknesses in domestic security programs are definitely some things we don't want getting into the wrong hand. But then, fourth, publishing stolen material should be illegal. Giving the illegal information or the classified information is in of itself a crime, but then receiving and publishing those results is you being complicit. It's like accepting a bank robber's money. But then, accountability. We did not vote for the journalists, we voted for the system. This short circuits democracy, eliminating the checks and balances that make American democracy great. In essence, journalists are not accountable to the American people, but the government is. But then finally, this actually ultimately hurts relations. When Edward Snowden published all of the papers he did, he hurt China relations by exposing the United States' attack on Russia. And fundamentally, other countries won't trust the United States because they don't want their secrets